Well, the easiest way to come here would be if someone has a wife or husband who's a U.S. citizen or even has a green card, as long as we can show it's a real marriage and not just a marriage to get a green card. A lot of people come to the United States because they have political problems. Your country is very politically unstable. So I've done a lot of cases representing people from Bangladesh who need asylum. The asylum rate goes first, some people apply before the asylum office and other people apply before immigration judges. In terms of immigration judges, each judge has a different track record, and each area of the country has a different track record. Here in the New York area, we have a very high approval rate, especially if someone has an attorney. Down by the Mexican border in places like Texas, they have an extremely low approval rate because they're less favorably disposed to immigrants down by the southern border. So my advice is if someone wants to apply for asylum, they should move to a friendly location like New York before they apply because they're more likely to be successful. And having an immigration lawyer really is even more important because the statistics have shown people without a lawyer almost never win their cases, and people with a good lawyer have a much improved chance of winning their cases because immigration law and asylum law are very technical, and you have to communicate why you're afraid to live in your country, why you fled from your country, and the judge has to believe you. So it's much more difficult than if you're just being sponsored by your adult son, let's say. All you have to do is prove that the person is your son. If people have employment skills, sometimes they can be sponsored for a job. Even if they're not in the United States, sometimes that's better because if someone is getting sponsored for a job, they can't be here without papers for too long or they won't be able to get a green card. But if someone is still in Bangladesh, but there's an employer here who wants to bring them to work for the company if they have the experience. One is like a typographical error. You misspell your name, or you write 3/9 is your birth date, and in this country that means March 9th, in other countries it means September 3rd, so you have to clarify that as soon as possible because immigration does background checks based on the spelling of a person's name and their birth dates. If it's more serious, such as somebody said they came here with a visitor's visa, and when they got the visitor's visa, they said they had a good job and a wife and 5 children, and now they're here and it turns out they had no job and they were single, no wife, no children. That's a more serious issue because now these people will need a waiver in the future before they can get a green card or a work visa. So it depends on what the mistake is. Typically, if it's a mistake and the person voluntarily says, "Oh, I made a mistake," that's better than waiting until immigration catches the mistake. If people want to get sponsored for work and they come here and fall out of status, they might not be able to if they stay here too long. So again, it's best if people try to figure out a strategy as quickly as possible to stay here once they've come here, because once they're out of status, they might lose certain avenues of being able to stay here. If you can do it legally, that's certainly the best way, because if you come here and sneak into the country, there are complications. If you come here and don't leave when your visa is up, there could be complications. So I would suggest consulting with an experienced immigration lawyer as soon as you can, and to describe what your intentions are and to describe how you'd like to stay here. A good immigration lawyer could help spot ways you could stay here legally or get legalized as quickly as possible. The recent increases that they came up with were for the business immigration classes, which they raised fees quite a bit. For the family immigration categories, they haven't done that yet, but there's talk they want to. Essentially it's a tax on people who are trying to get into the country. Unfortunately, Congress doesn't give much money to immigration to work on cases that have to have user fees to do it. And since asylum cases have no fee, it's free to apply for asylum, all the other categories basically have a surcharge built in to pay for the asylum cases. And since there are so many asylum cases, immigration needs to raise the fees for everything else to help pay for the asylum cases. For most categories, there's no particular amount of money other than, for example, for asylum, it doesn't matter. If you're being sponsored for a job, it doesn't matter because the job will be paying you. If you're being sponsored by a husband or a wife, the sponsor, that person has to earn approximately $20,000 or so for two people. If they have more dependents, they have to earn a little more. Well, for people in the United States, they're passing regulations to make it easier for people to be here in many categories. When people get permission to work, they're extending it for 2 years instead of 1 year. When people get asylum, they can apply for the green card essentially right away and not wait for 1 year before they apply. This is a very new procedure because to get a green card could take over 3 years. So this shows how they're sympathetic to the fact that by waiting a year before you could file, which is the way it used to be, that makes it 4 years instead of 3 years. So I would say that the climate is better than it was under the Trump administration, which was, for the most part, much more anti-immigrant. If someone shows up at the Mexican border, they might have problems, but if people get into the United States or asked to apply for asylum at JFK Airport, for example, they will get a fair hearing before an immigration judge.